You know, sometimes we get in routines to where we never do an evaluation of where we are in our life. And I want you to do this today. I want you to look at the year past and then at the year future. I want us to do that. But at the same time, I want us to deal with today as well. And so what is it that you have accomplished this last year? What have you accomplished for the Lord? What is it? Sometimes we get in these routines where we just get up in the morning, we go to work, we do our thing, we come home, we eat supper, we go to bed. Well, there's a shower in there somewhere. All right. And then we do the same thing over and over and over, and we get in these routines, and sometimes those routines help to detract us from what really our life is all about. I mean, what is, and let's go through here these verses. James chapter number 4, verse number 13. Go to now, ye that say, today or tomorrow we will go into such a city and continue there a year, and buy and sell and get gain. Whereas you know not what shall be on the morrow. For what is your life? It is even a vapor that appeareth for a little time and then vanisheth away. For that ye ought to say, if the Lord will, we shall live and do this or that. But now ye rejoice in your boastings. All such rejoicing is evil. Therefore to him that knoweth to do good and to doeth it not, to him it is sin. So I want to back up for just a minute, and I want to look at verse number 14. I really want to key in there for a minute. It says, whereas you know not what shall be on the morrow, for what is your life? God asked a question, and I believe he's asking this question to you and I. What is your life? And then it says, it is even a vapor that appeareth for a little time and then vanisheth away. Appeareth. I want you to tie those two things together. What is your life and appeareth? If you tie those two things together, your appearance. Now, the little Hunsucker baby, Ian Gerald Hunsucker. You've heard this phrase before, but he made his appearance on Christmas Eve. Right? You've heard that before, right? When a little baby is born, they've made their appearance. And then later on, when someone dies, they're no longer appear. They're gone. They're no longer here. But their appearance. Now, there's something that I ran across in study on this, but it says that in the course of a woman's lifespan, at least in our Western culture, and I don't know how they got these numbers or what age they came up with or whatever, but over the course of a woman's lifespan, she spends, get ready, I'm going to make all of you mad here, she spends $250,000 on her appearance over the course of a lifetime. Now, when you add in hair, and you add in jewelry, and you add in makeup, and you add in clothing, and you add in accessories, and you add in all those kind of things. And I don't know, some of you is making that average go a little higher, and some of you is not, making it go a little lower. But this is not the appearance I'm talking about, okay? I'm not talking about the way that we look, the way that we dress. I'm talking about our life, how we appear. And because it mentions here, of course, this is talking about the brevity of life, and it's talking about a vapor, comparing it to our life to a vapor, and it just happens that fast. It really does. It happens that fast. When compared to eternity, it really is not even that long. I mean, there's not an analogy that you can give that could properly illustrate how brief life is in comparison to eternity. And when you look at that, and you think about, it does emphasize the brevity of life, and then, that vapor, you can't control it, you can't hold it, you can't grasp it, you can't do any of that, and it's just there, And so it's here, and then it's gone. That vapor, it goes up, and then it's gone, right? Well, that's what our life is. It appeared for just a little time, and then it's gone. And so what I want to speak on this morning is making the most of your appearance. And I don't mean our makeup and my hairdo and my hairstyle, or ladies, your makeup or jewelry or anything like that. I'm talking about our life, making the most of our appearance. And so how can we do that? How can we make the most of our appearance? How can we do that? When you think about this vapor, this life that we have, it's just really a moment of time. It's really all it is. It's just a moment of time. And when you think about people that have lived. Now, I'll give you a couple illustrations here. Can you imagine living in the time of the apostles? Can you imagine living on this earth when the apostles appeared? What I mean by that is Peter, James, John, the apostle Paul, James, the other James, Matthew, Luke, all them. Can you imagine living on earth at the time of their appearance? Can you imagine that? All right, but guess what? They don't appear anymore, do they? Now, we still read some of their writings. We still are experiencing some of the influence of their life. Now, let's get a little more contemporary. What about Billy Graham and Chuck Swindoll and W.A. Criswell? Now, I just throwing out a few names there. You may not know any of them. I don't know, but you may know a few of them. But those are men that that are contemporaries, that lived in that vapor, in that moment of time together. And now we still read some of their sermons. We still sense the effects. And now some of you just went to the Billy Graham Library, so I know that you've heard that name. And you can see the influence that he used with the little brief moment of time that he had with his appearance. You with me? And so, I took Jed hunting the Saturday before they were to leave on Monday. And I took him hunting, and where we were hunting at, we had dogs. They run with dogs down in Richmond County. And so we were there, and where I had to park my truck, and me and Jed got on back of the truck, and we were overlooking this field, and they were running dogs in the woods, and in the hopes that a deer might run out. But in that field, in the middle of that field, there was an old house. Yeah, and you can ride by and you'll see some of these old houses around the county or whatever, and it was dilapidated, it was old, and he said, Poppy, he said, who lives there? And I said, Jed, I don't think anybody lives there. And then he asked another question. He said, well, who did live there? And I said, I don't know. I don't know who lived there. And what I'm saying is some of us use our moments of time, our appearance, to have more influence than others, all right? And what I'm saying to you, if we're going to make the most of our appearance, there's some things that we can look at, and there's some things that can help us make the most of our appearance, all right? So let's look at some of these. Look in verse 15. For that ye ought to say, if the Lord will, we shall live and do this or that. So in other words, they were going, hey, we're going to go make some money. They had their plans. They had their ideas of what they were going to do. But then he mentions here, he says, hold on a minute. He says, hold on, you need to involve the Lord in your plans. You need to involve the Lord in what you're doing. You need to seek the Lord in what you're doing. And so the first thing here that I think we ought to do if we're going to make the most of our appearance is that we need to delight in the Lord. Delight in the Lord. Now, let me take you to a verse over here in Psalm 37. Psalm 37, it says this. It says, fret not thyself because of evildoers, neither be thou envious against the workers of iniquity, for they shall soon be cut down like grass and wither as the green herb. Again, this is talking about the brevity of life, and he's saying, fret not thyself because of evildoers. Now look, there's so many people that live among us, and even in our church, that they get so worked up. I mean, they get so worked up about things that might happen tomorrow. Now, Faye and I, we're going to be traveling to Israel this week. All right, and so you be praying for us. Did I mention that in prayer request? I didn't mention that in prayer request. Okay, we're leaving Tuesday, and we're going to be going to Israel for about a week or so, and so you be praying for us. All right. But now look, and look, even packing and getting things together, and my wife, she's the planner. She's been with me a long time, and she's the planner. And I can't tell you how many times that she's asked, do we have enough time in between our connecting flights? Yes, Faye, we have enough time in between our connecting flight. And we've talked about that 2 or 3 different times. And I'm saying that, look, so many times we worry about things. I'm not saying don't plan. That's not what I'm saying. Don't plan. But sometimes we are so worried about what things might happen that we end up forfeiting the day that we have because of the day that we're worried about tomorrow. You know, and we get so caught up in those things. It says, fret not thyself because of evildoers. You know, some people get so worked up about what other people are doing or saying. And I mean, they get so worked up about that they can't even control themselves. And, man, I mean, they're worried sick about all that. Man, what if they say this? And what if they do this? And they can't. Look, delight in the Lord. Instead of looking everywhere else, look to the Lord. Look to the Lord. As a matter of fact, let me go back to Psalm 37. And it shows us the end of wickedness there. And in verse number 3, it says, trust in the Lord and do good, and so shalt thou dwell in the land, and verily thou shalt be fed. Delight thyself also in the Lord, and he shall give thee the desires of thine heart. Delighting in the Lord. You know, here's the thing about delighting in the Lord. Is it possible for a little boy to take out the trash and not delight in taking out the trash? But is it possible to delight in doing the things that you're supposed to do? Is it possible to do that? See, I'm going to give you an example. All right, I'm going to give you an example, and I'm going to use a right here example, and I'm going to use Glenn Benfield. All right. Now everybody knows Glenn, right? I hope you do. I hope you know Glenn. And now look, Glenn, he's a missionary. His heart is still there in the Philippines. He's still ministering. He's still there. But look, here's the thing: above everything else, ministry-wise, everything, he loves the Lord. Do you believe that? I mean, if the Lord were to take him off the field, guess what? He still loves the Lord. If the Lord's going to keep him on the field, guess what? He loves the Lord. If the Lord's going to send him to Alaska, who knows? Debbie's going, He still loves the Lord. Does that make sense? So it doesn't matter where he is. He's delighting in serving the Lord. Now, I'm going to let this play out here. Now, look, he's here at Mount Carmel now, right? And guess what? He loved the Lord before he got to Mount Carmel. He loved the Lord while he was in the Philippines. Does he still love the Lord while he's at Mount Carmel? Absolutely. And guess what? And now he's working with our seniors, correct? And he guess what? Is he loving what he's doing? Is he loving it? Why is he loving that? It's not because, I got to work with seniors, and I got to do this, and I got to do that, and man, I got to go through my list and all these things. Can you believe all the responsibilities I got? I can't do all this. And going through that. Is that what he's doing? No, he's delighting in the Lord. And now the Lord is using him in certain positions, and he's just excited to be used of the Lord and excited to be serving the Lord. And guess what? It says that if you desire, go back with me. I lost my place there. By the way, the Lord, and he will give thee the desires of thy heart. And so our desires, he's going to give us those desires. If we're delighting in him, what is he going to do? He's going to give us those desires. Now look, as a pastor, I can tell you when the Lord began to deal with me about pastoring, about preaching. Look, I'm telling you, I didn't want to do that. No way, you got the wrong guy. But guess what? Now, I was serving the Lord. I loved the Lord. I was teaching Sunday school. I was helping in children's church. I was doing all sorts of things in ministry and all that, volunteering to do things and all that. Now, I love the Lord, but because of my love for the Lord, guess what he began to do with the desires of my heart? He began to change my desires to match his desires, right? I've gone over this with you before. And now, I can stand in front of people, and guess what? I'm not near as nervous as I used to be. I mean, I used to shake. I used to cry. I used to want to hide back here. And what I'm saying is that if you're delighting in the Lord, he changes your heart to match his desires that he has for your life. And so if we're going to make the most of our appearance, the first thing we're going to have to do is delight in the Lord, if the Lord will. If the Lord will. That's what it says in verse 15 there. Now, does he enjoy what he's doing? Does he enjoy it? Look, is it a lot of, believe me, I have planned trips. It's a lot of work getting a trip planned. How many of you enjoy planning trips? 0. 1, half of one. Okay, I got this up here. Okay. But here's the thing. If you're delighting in the Lord and the Lord has put that in your heart, He's laid that at your feet, and this is what I have for you, and this is how I want you to serve me. Look, if you're delighting in the Lord, guess what? That is not a drudgery, and that is not something that you have to do. It's something I get to do, and I get to serve Him, and I get to be part of His ministry and His work. Delighting in the Lord. So delighting in the Lord. So the first way, if we're going to make our appearance count, if we're going to make the most of it, we're going to have to delight in the Lord. Now, if you look back across this year, can you honestly say, I delighted in the Lord? If you look across it right now, this very moment, when I walked into church, man, was it, I had to come to church, and I'm talking about heart thing. I'm not talking about, your wife made you come, or your husband made you come, or your mom and daddy made you come. Were you delighting in serving the Lord today? Were you delighting in being here today? I'll be honest with you. There's days for me, it's not really a delight because I let my flesh get in the way. And I want what I want sometimes. But here's the thing. If we're going to make the most of our appearance, what I mean by that for the Lord, then we're going to have to delight in Him. We're going to have to delight in Him. All right, so the second thing here, let me give you the second thing, is to not only delight in the Lord, but discover His supply. Look in verse 13. It says, Go to now, ye that say, today or tomorrow we will go into such a city and continue there and buy and sell and get gain. They are attempting, and there's nothing wrong with making money. There's nothing wrong in being in business. There's nothing wrong in working and acquiring a paycheck. There's nothing wrong with those things. But there's something that they were doing here is they were leaving the Lord out of this. They had made their plans. They were doing what they want to do, and they were relying in their own strength and their own abilities and their own trust and their own wherewithal to accomplish what they were wanting to do for the next year. Look what it says. Continue there a year and buy and sell and get gain. I mean, they were planning to make a year's wage right there. That's what they were planning on doing. And they had forgotten the Lord all about it. And here's the thing that we also need to discover in this is not only to delight in the Lord, but discover His supply. We spend so much time running around trying to get our own and acquire our own resources, make sure we got something to eat and something to live, and pay the bills and all this stuff. But look, and I'm not saying there's something wrong with working. The Bible says if a man will not work, neither should he eat. All right? So look, the Bible I think is clear. We should work. But we shouldn't leave the Lord out of our gain. Does that make sense? And so he's saying here that, look, we need to not just discover, by the way, when you can't supply, guess who can? And there's so many people that, and I'm not talking about financial per se, I'm talking about all the things that we need. All the things that we need. Let me show you another verse. Psalm 68. Verse number 19. Blessed be the Lord who daily loadeth us with benefits. Now hold on, let me read that again. Blessed be the Lord who daily loadeth us with benefits. Does that mean He just piecemeals it out just a little bit? He just gives you a little morsel, a little sample every day. Is that what it says? It says no. It says, blessed be the Lord who daily loadeth us with benefits, even the God of our salvation. He daily loadeth us with benefits. So here's the thing. Does the Lord give us what we need to get through the day? Absolutely He does. As a matter of fact, if we're going to make the most of our appearance, we've got to discover His supply. Now, a lot of us, we're really good at complaining. I can be a good complainer. Can you? And sometimes we even disguise it as a prayer request. And we can complain about our situations. Sometimes we can complain about our spouse. We can complain about our kids. We can complain about our job. We can complain about our family. We can complain about what I didn't or did get for Christmas or whatever. We can complain about everything. But here's the thing. We spend so much time complaining that we fail to see the extra blessings that God is really giving to us. I'm going to give you an example of this. Is Faye and I one time, this has been years ago, we were up in the mountains and we were staying with my uncle. And this is when we were traveling and preaching, and it was one of those weekends or during the week, or I can't remember. But he had a mountain house, and he had it to where he had a sunrise and sunset. You could see both, and man, I mean, mountains everywhere. It's about 5,000 feet elevation. And we were there, and and we went for a walk. And it was a road up in the mountains, and there was hardly anything around. Went for a walk, and you're taking in the sights. You know what I'm talking about when you're in the mountains. That's what you do, man. I mean, you see the valleys, you see the mountains everywhere. I mean, the wind's blowing, and I mean, you see the animals and the birds, and the sunrise and the sunset. You can see all those things, those large things that you see, and they kind of get your attention, and you can just be in awe at God's creation and all that kind of thing. And then we sat down by the edge of the road. It might have been on a rock or something like that. We sat down on a rock, and I got to looking around, and I looked, and there was a little bitty purple flower. Now, I was hurriedly going my way. If I had kept on hurriedly going my way, I would have never even noticed that little purple flower that was doing what God had made it to do and created it to do. And it wasn't any bigger than the end of my finger. You know what I mean? But there it was. And it was shining, and I mean, it was beautiful, and it was, but just going down your way, I would have never even noticed it. You understand? And so, look, this is what we do. We get so busy complaining about the things we don't have or the situations we're in, and, man, we're walking down this path, and, and we don't take the time to stop and realize the blessings that God has given us every single day. We fail to realize it. But the Bible says he loadeth us with blessings every single day. Loadeth us. And we overlook those little blessings that God gives us sometimes. And I'm going to tell you, it causes us to go from a heart of gratitude to a heart of ingratitude, because now we're complaining about what we don't have or what we want and didn't get or whatever else. And we fail to mention and fail to see the little things that he does for us in our life. God has done something for you today. But have you thought of it? Have you looked for it? If we're going to make the most of our appearance, this is what we're going to have to do. We're going to have to discover his supply. He gives us what we need every single day, whether we realize it or not. Whether we realize it or not. You remember some of you will remember this. You have some age on you. Joni Eareckson Tada. You remember her? I don't think she's living anymore. I think she is still living. Okay, and but she's getting on up there in years. And Joni Eareckson Tada, if you don't know her, she had an accident as a young teenager, and she was swimming and dove in or something like that, and she became paralyzed, and she was a paraplegic from that day forward. And now look, let's just look at her appearing for a minute, her life for a minute. Now, before that time, nobody ever knew. The world scene didn't know who Joni Eareckson Tada was, but now I mentioned that. How many know who that is? About maybe half of us, okay. And now she has made I guess, let me just say, she has promoted the Lord with her life in a greater capacity in her handicap than she ever did when she was a full health before that. And I watched something here recently. She was talking, and she said something about, if God had never let this happen in my life, I would have never been able to experience him the way that I've experienced him. And the things that he's taught me, and the things that he's helped me with. And now she used that verse, loaded me with benefits every single day. Now here's a woman who's sitting in a wheelchair, can't move, can't feel. And she's thanking the God of heaven for what he did to her, because now she can experience his blessings and his supply in her life that she would not have otherwise sensed. And look, there are times when we're going through seasons of life. You've seen that old what do you call it? Sometimes they have it on a plaque or something like that about the two sets of footprints. You remember that? And then eventually, man, I mean, the road was getting hard and getting tough, and then there was one set of footprints. And then the person was getting mad because, man, the Lord wasn't walking with him no more. And then there's only one set of footprints, and I feel like I'm carrying all the load. But in the end, who was carrying the load? The Lord was carrying the load. And when they realized that, look, I wasn't alone. And he was there with me, and he was sustaining me, and he was helping me. And look, this is what we fail to realize many times is the hardships that we go through. It is God trying to display himself to us. It is God trying to be real to us. It is God trying to supply us with spiritual blessings and needs that we have that we don't even sometimes know that we even need. But he's there and he's giving us and he's pouring out these things on a daily basis. And if we're going to make the most of our appearance, we've got to understand that, look, not just to delight in the Lord, but to discover his supply. Discover his supply in that. Miss Virginia, I'm going to use Miss Virginia as an example. We were in the hospital just the other day, a couple weeks ago. And Danielle was in there, and I happened to go in and make a visit, and Danielle happened to be there. And we were chit-chatting a little bit, and I was picking at Miss Virginia about her hair and all that stuff. She hadn't fixed her hair in a couple of days, and I asked her who her beautician was, and so we had a laugh about that, you know. And then a little bit later, I said, Miss Virginia, I said, what can I pray for you for? What can I pray? And this is what she said. She said, you know, I wish, I hope that the Lord would heal me, heal my body, touch my body. He said, but you know what? She said, I'm okay either way. She said, I'm ready to go. And she said, you know, but it's okay. You know, I just want what the Lord wants, and it's okay either way. Now look, what does that mean? Here's the thing. When you get to a season like that, let me ask you something. Does Miss Virginia love the Lord? She does. Does she delight in the Lord? I believe she does. And look, over these years, she's lived by herself for many years. She's got family taking care of her, and I appreciate all of them. But has she learned to rest and discover God's supply for her life? Has she discovered that? Yes, she has. And I'm going to tell you, it's a special, sweet thing when you can see someone who is resting in the Lord, and she's there, and she's learned to discover his strength and discover his supply for her life. And so if we're going to make the most of our appearance, we've got to delight in the Lord, and we've got to discover his supply. And God supplies us every single day with benefits. Have you recognized it today with you personally? Now, and then there's a third thing. And let's go back to James chapter 4. Let's look in verse number 13. It says, go to now, you that say, today or tomorrow we will go into such a city, and continue there a year, and buy and sell, and get gain. Wherefore you know not what shall be on the morrow, for what is your life? It is even a vapor, it appeareth for a little time, and then vanisheth away. Now look, we've got to delight in the Lord, we've got to discover his supply, but then we've got to daily live for him. Daily live for him. Matthew, let me read a verse over in Matthew chapter 6. Matthew chapter 6, verse number 34, the Bible tells us this. It says, take therefore no thought for the morrow shall take thought for the things of itself. Sufficient unto the day is the evil thereof. What is he saying in that verse? He's saying, look, quit being so worried about tomorrow. Take care of today. Live for the Lord today. Live for him today. You remember the Bible tells us this in Ephesians chapter, I think it's chapter 5. It says, let not the sun go down upon your wrath, neither give place to the devil. You remember that verse? What is he saying? Let not the sun go down upon your wrath. In other words, deal with that thing today, right? Today. So look, we can get so caught up about what might happen tomorrow, or so concerned about the future, or sometimes we can look in the past. I had a fellow recently, man, he had a difficult time with his past, about dealing with that past and moving forward in his life in the past. Well, you don't know what I've done. It doesn't matter what you've done. It really doesn't. God can forgive, and you can live for him today. You know, you can live for him today. Look, God gives grace and he gives strength. Does he give us a supply? Yes. But when does he give it? He gives it when we need it. Do we need it tomorrow? We will need it tomorrow, but is he giving tomorrow's grace today? Is he giving yesterday's grace today? No, he gives us what he needs when we need it, and that is right now. He gives it to us today. and we can daily live for him. Now, I can look at, I'll use, Katie and Jordan are pretty fresh in all of our minds, and I can look at this two different ways. Now, as a parent, a grandparent, I can get upset because that rascally Jordan is taking my grandkids to a whole nother continent, and I'm not going to see my grandkids, and I'm not going to see my daughter for a year. Can you believe that? I mean, I need to go punch him in the nose, don't I? Or I can, like the Apostle Paul, he says, I have no greater joy that my children walk in truth. And so, look, I am thankful. Am I missing them? Am I going to miss them? Absolutely. But I'm going to tell you, this is the greatest separation that you could ever have. People loving the Lord and serving the Lord, and we're separated because, look, here's the thing, and I'm so grateful for this, is that they love the Lord more than they love me. And look, that's the way it's supposed to be. It's not that they don't love me and love Faye and love the rest of them. Robin. Is Robin in here today? Okay, back there. It's not that they don't love us, but look, they love somebody more. And oh, that's a blessing. And look, sometimes even them leaving, think of this. We get so worked up about them, about the day they're leaving, and we miss days leading all the way up to the day because we're fretting and we're worried and look, we got to serve the Lord today, the day that we have. Because look, I watched them leave the airport, leave our car, and they leave the cars and go walk into the airport. And but here's the thing, that can be a negative thing or it can be a positive thing. And I'm grateful that, look, they're serving the Lord and I'm serving the Lord, and my prayer for them is that they just be faithful, that they be faithful. Look, we got enough to deal with today than to worry about tomorrow. You know that? We do. Live for him while you can, and while you can is today. Go back and read the verse. Verse 14, whereas you know not what shall be on the morrow, for what is your life? It is even a vapor that appeareth for a little time and then vanisheth away. God will give me the grace. He will give me everything that I need to get through this day. He's going to give me the supply. And look, because he's given me the supply, I have the ability to live for him today. I have that ability, and I have that. So look, God asked a question here. Go back to verse 14. Wherever you know not what shall be on the morrow. And here God is asking a question. Now let this question, it's just like God is asking it to me and he's asking it to you. He says, what is your life? What is it? And as you look back across this year, can you honestly say, did you make the most of your appearance by delighting in the Lord, by discovering his supply, and by daily living for him? If you can't say that, you need to come today and say, look, we're starting a new year. And God, I want to make the most of my appearance. I want to make the most influence. I want to make the most impact that I can make for his honor and for his glory. And if I'm going to do that, I'm going to, first of all, have to delight in the Lord. And if I delight in the Lord, he's going to affect my desires, right? If I delight in the Lord. And then secondly, I'm going to discover his supply. This is something that a lot of Christians live and they never ever experience, is the supply that only God can give. And then make the determination that I'm going to daily live for him. If we're going to make the most of our appearance, that's what it's going to take. And God asked that question, what is your appearance or what is your life? Is even a vapor. Appears for a little time and then vanisheth away. What are you doing with your appearance? Are you making the most of it? Who are you living for? Lots of questions to be asked there. And delight in the Lord, discover his supply, and daily live in his benefits. So as we look across this past year and we look across this next year coming up, I wonder, were there things, did you live this way? You worried about things? Anxious about stuff? Making plans without involving the Lord? Perhaps you have some prayer request that only God knows about. Perhaps you're looking at your life and you say, you know what, there's some things I need to do a little differently. I need to live a little differently. I need to acknowledge the Lord more in my life, and I want my appearance to matter. I want to make the most of it for this coming year. And God asked that question, what is your life? What is your life? Is your appearance going to make a difference in somebody else's life? What is your life? Only you can answer those questions. Perhaps you have someone this year you've been praying for. Perhaps you have a lost loved one that you know is lost and you want to pray for them. And may God use you to be the catalyst to bring them, point them to Him, be a witness to them. Perhaps you need to, I don't know what you need to pray for. I have no idea. There's lots to pray for. Whatever it is, I know the Lord wants to hear and He wants to supply. He wants you to delight in Him. He wants you to supply our daily needs, and we can live for Him on a daily basis because He's supplying those needs every single day. Let's stand together. We'll sing Him invitation. If the Lord has spoken to you about something, Lord, come and tell it to Him.
Take my life, lead me, Lord. Take my life, lead me, Lord. Make my life useful to Thee. Take